everybody, it's Damien from Guitar Journey here, and today I'm going to give you 3 pretty cool ways to land into your chord shapes more precisely and more reflexively. You know, comfortably moving from chord to chord is something that beginning guitarists and honestly even some intermediate level guitarists sometimes struggle with, and yet it's one of the most important things you can develop early on. Now, when you're less experienced, you may find yourself trying to shape a chord one finger at a time. You know, for example, if I'm shaping a D chord, maybe I put my index finger in place first, and then maybe my middle finger, then maybe my ring finger, or maybe in some other order, whatever, one at a time, and then I'm good to go. And that's totally fine when you're a beginner. In fact, when you're very early in the learning process, that's actually a good way to do it because it ensures that you're fingering the chord correctly, you're being pretty precise about it, and you're not developing any bad habits. But eventually, you need to break out of that. You need to start landing chords reflexively without having to think about them. And at that point, you want your fingers moving in a more cohesive fashion. In other words, all 3 fingers or all 4 fingers, whatever the case may be, landing in the chord shape pretty much simultaneously as opposed to one finger at a time like I demonstrated earlier. You want them all moving together, landing in the chord shape pretty much simultaneously, as I said. So today I'm going to share with you a few exercises that'll not only help you to make that happen, but they can also be some ideas that you can actually incorporate into your rhythm playing, okay? As I always say, the best exercises are the ones that you can actually apply in a musical fashion, okay? So let's get right to it. As sort of a teaching platform, I want you to try to jot down on a notepad or whatever 4 chords in a row, okay? Doesn't matter what those 4 chords are, just 4 different chords in a row, okay? Really doesn't matter which ones they are. And the reason I like to do 4 chords in a row and not begin to learn and apply these exercises in the course of a given song, there are 2 reasons actually. First, let's face it, trying to play through an entire song when you're earlier in the learning process can be kind of overwhelming. You're looking at your fretting hand, then you look down at your strumming hand, and then you look at the sheet music, and then you look back at your fretting hand and back at your strumming hand, and by the time you look at the sheet music or the chord chart, whatever, sometimes, you know, you've gotten kind of lost. You're wondering which chord you're on, and maybe which line you're on. And that's actually pretty common. So if that's happening to you, please don't feel badly about it. But the bottom line is, focusing on the sheet music requires a fair amount of our focus. And honestly, right now, we want to devote all of our focus to our fretting hand. And we don't want to be distracted by having to look at sheet music or a chord chart or whatever. Now, the nice thing about a 4-chord sequence is that you can memorize it pretty quickly. And then you can put all of your attention on making the proper shapes, okay? And also, by the way, the other reason I like to do it 4 chords at a time is that just to sort of reinforce the idea that music tends to be written 4 measures at a time or in multiples of 4 measures, okay? So it's a little bit of extra musical reinforcement, you know, and honestly, to get into any more detail than that would be a discussion for another time. But I do like to encourage players, even in early in the learning process, to develop a sense of structure about music, okay? So that's why I like to practice just 4 chords at a time, all right? So the first exercise, okay? First exercise we're going to do is we're going to take those 4 chords, whatever they happen to be, whatever you've chosen. For this one, I'm going to go A minor, then C, then G, and then D. But again, just pick any 4. But I'm going A minor to C to G to D, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to strum through the chord with a downstroke, and then with an upstroke, we're going to strike string numbers 1, then 2, then 3, okay? It's going to look like this. I'm demonstrating on the A minor chord. I strum through the chord, and then with an upstroke, I hit string 1, then string 2, then string 3. Okay, strum 1, 2, 3, like that, okay? Now as we do this, we move from chord to chord and we're going to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and on the next chord. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay? Each chord is actually getting 2 beats. My A minor gets beats 1 and 2, my C gets beats 3 and 4. Next measure, my G chord gets 1 and 2, my D chord gets beats 3 and 4, okay? Quick aside, if you're not comfortable with rhythmic counting, remember, when we're counting beats, our quarter notes get beats 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are our quarter notes. But there are 2 eighth notes for every quarter note. And so when we're counting eighth notes, we're counting 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. And that's what we're doing with our basic strum 1, 2, 3, okay? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And of course, what you want to do is put on either a metronome or a drum beat and play this sequence without pausing between chords. Play it to the metronome, play it to the drum beat. I've got my metronome, my drum app queued in, and I'm going to start it now. Got the metronome set to 80 beats per minute, but of course you should set it to whatever will be sort of a comfortable challenge for you. So here's what the exercise can sound like with a drum beat. Just like that. Now, once you get comfortable playing the chords with the drum beat, of course, you increase the tempo to keep yourself continually challenged, okay? And additionally, of course, you want to play as many different chord sequences as possible, okay? All right, that's exercise 1. Exercise 2. All we're going to do is we're going to, at the end of a measure, on literally the last 2/16 notes of a measure, we're going to left hand mute the strings and we're going to strike with a downward stroke. And then with an upward strum, we're actually going to strum the open strings like that. Downward stroke with my left hand muting the strings, upward stroke of the open strings. Now, immediately after that upward stroke of the open strings, I'm going to try to land the first chord in my 4-chord sequence. So for example, let's try another chord sequence, okay? I'm going to go with E major, G major, A major, and then C major, okay? E, G, A, C. And I'm going to start by not being in any chord shape. I'm actually in this muted shape, okay? If you look at my left hand, my fingers are just kind of flopped over the strings, cutting off any vibration. I want this nice dead sound, okay? Nothing really there. If we start to hear pitches emerging, that means you're probably pressing down in the mute too hard. If we start to hear, you know, that kind of thing, you don't want that. You're pressing down too hard, and that's a pretty common issue. It takes a little time to get this nice light touch where we're completely muting the strings without pressing down too hard. So again, I'm going to downstroke the left hand mute, upstroke the open strings, and then immediately snap into my first chord shape and hit that with a downstroke. Okay? I'm actually going to count it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, okay? And a 1, like that. And a 1, okay? Now, without, again, getting into too detailed a discussion of rhythm, like I mentioned earlier, we count our quarter notes 1, 2, 3, 4. We count our eighth notes 1 and, 2 and, 3 and, 4 and. 16th notes, there are 4 16th notes for every beat. And we count them 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a, like that, okay? And my downstroke of the left hand mute takes place at the end of beat 4. It's on the, what we call the the and, pardon me. The downstroke is on the and the open string upstroke is on the the final 16th note of the 4th beat. And then following that, my downstroke of the actual chord shape takes place on the very first beat of the following measure. So again, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, like that. And what I do is I just let the chord ring out for the rest of the measure until the fourth beat, and I'm going to repeat the process, moving to the next chord in the sequence. In this case, it's going to be after the E chord, it's a G chord. The downstroke of the muted strings happens on the and of the fourth beat, and the upstroke of the open strings happens on the okay, the final 16th note of that fourth beat, and then I shape my next chord and I land it, downstroking on the first beat of the following measure, just like I did a moment ago. So again, E, G, A, C is going to look and sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 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 1, 2, 3, 4, and I keep going, and a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Okay? And again, it's a good idea to put a metronome on, or a drum beat, whatever you happen to have, and start at a slow tempo, but gradually speed up. Challenge yourself to really nail those chord shapes in a reflexive manner. Okay? By the way, you can use this mute up idea in your strumming, okay? If I do those same chords, E to G to A to C, and do a simple strum pattern with that mute up idea at the end of each measure, it can sound pretty cool. Maybe like this. I'm going to go... like that, okay? Now the final drill I'm going to give you is much less structured than the other two. I'm going to suggest to you that you consider this final drill to be more of an experiment where you can find different ways to express different chords in a creative manner. This is a real oversimplification, but what you might find is that very often we can either hammer on into the chord shape from an open string, or we can pull off from a given string in the chord shape to the open string. Okay, here's what I mean. If I'm shaping this A major chord like this, I can actually lift all my fingers, strum the open strings, and then try to hammer into the chord shape. Like that, okay? Like that. And when I do it in the context, it can actually sound pretty cool. And additionally, I'm training my hands again to work together and snap into that shape. I can do the same thing with an E chord. Like that, again. And you kind of listen, did I really snap into the shape, and am I hearing each string clearly, okay? Now, in addition to snapping into the entire chord shape, you can also hammer on and pull off, or pull off, one finger at a time. For example, I'm going to shape an A minor chord here, and then instead of just strumming the A minor chord, I can pick individual strings and maybe lift a finger to the open string and hammer on into that chord, into the place for the chord shape. So for example, I lift my middle finger, strike the open fourth string, and then hammer in. Again. I can do it with my index finger as well. Can do it with my ring finger. Okay? And I can do that with a wide variety of chords. And when I do it, it sounds pretty nice. And additionally, I'm developing a flexible sort of strength in my fretting hand. And I'm also developing some good coordination and precision with my individual fingers. Now, of course, this works better with some chords than others, and that's where your own personal experimentation comes in, okay? And you can pull off various notes too. If I'm shaping a D chord, for example, I might like to hammer on to the third string with my index finger, but I can pull off with my middle finger on the first string from the second fret, pulling off to the open first string. And again, in context, that really sounds pretty nice. The idea is to experiment with this, have a little fun, be a little creative with it. And in the process, you're giving your hands a really good strength and flexibility workout. And as you experiment with this, you can start to put together chord progressions and see how the various hammer-ons and the pull-offs sound in the context of that chord sequence, okay? I can take that same A minor to C to G to D sequence, whatever, and come up with something on the fly, maybe like this. Something like that. So, you know, you can experiment endlessly with this, and you should really just try to relax and allow yourself to enjoy the process of experimenting with these hammer-ons and pull-offs within the chord shapes. And who knows, you may even find yourself writing a pretty cool sounding riff, and that could eventually lead to you writing your first original song. Pretty cool idea, huh? And that leads me to my final point with all these exercises. They're all pretty musical sounding, and you'll find yourself using that strum 1, 2, 3, or that mute up, or the hammering on and pulling off ideas within chord shapes pretty frequently in your own rhythm playing. I always say the best sorts of exercises are musical ones, where we are actually practicing in a musical fashion, practicing a technique or an exercise, whatever, in a musical way so that we can then apply it to our actual playing. And I'd like to think that the 3 ideas I've given you today do fit that description. So have some fun with all of them, use them to learn to snap into those chord shapes, but also keep in mind that the better you get at them, you're making yourself a better rhythm player and with a more varied toolkit, a more varied means of articulating different chords in a given song. All right, that's all I got for you today. Thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And as always, please hit the subscribe button. We are building a musical community here. We're adding content all the time, and I would love to have you along for this amazing guitar journey. And as always, please leave a comment. I love to say, even if you happen to disagree with me or you feel that I've left something out, leave a comment so that we can all learn from each other. The exchange of ideas in a forum like this is a great way to enrich all of our respective guitar journeys. And there we are. Thanks so much again, and have a great day.